you know, something has gone away, he puts it, right? And so I think at the level of form, Baldwin is trying to write, right, in a way that captures, you know, trauma remembering or remembering trauma, right? And so it's deeply personal. So you get this moment where he's one moment he's telling the story of landing in Montgomery with his big typewriter and watching these white men watch him, and then he transitions from that moment to this condensed history. You know, Bobby Hutton wasn't even walking up steps.
Right.
Angela Davis was still here. Boom, boom. So you get this juxtaposition. So it's 72. Angela's already FBI most wanted list. Bobby Hutton is dead. And he's saying the moment I'm writing about, they were babies.
Yeah.
Look what has happened in this compressed period of time. And I'm trying to account for it, right? And so I think this is remembering.
Yeah.
This is the font that Toni was in. She was drinking these waters.
Yeah.
And Beloved is executing it at a level that I think there's a direct line to draw between the two books. But that's me. I'm nerding out right now.
That's awesome, man. That's absolutely what I was hoping we could do. Plus, a few of the students actually had questions about Morrison and Baldwin. So that was something we needed to touch upon. That there was a real connection between them personally, and a clear kind of inheritance from him to her, artistically, politically, aesthetically.
Ed, you get in the letters. I was in Toni's archives, and the letters between those two, Doc, and nothing but, you're like, how did they write this in longhand? And they weren't scratching it out.
Right.
What is going on?
Yeah.
The letters are off the charts. There's a poem that Jimmy writes to Toni that I wanted in the book, but we couldn't get permission from the estate. It's so cold. And Jimmy's poetry can leave you cold at times, right? It's like, it's like reading John Dewey's poetry. We're gonna just leave it in the drawer.
Right.
But bruh, it's so cold.
Well, hopefully we live long enough to see these letters, Morrison's, Baldwin's, curated in a proper way and made so that we can really travel with that as well. Yeah. I mean, you know how deeply invested I am in that. So, but about Baldwin's, we also have a question about Baldwin the poet, from the students, and I want to ask you that and get you to talk about it, because it's also about Emerson. But I think Baldwin's poetry, the actual poems written in lines, I think they tend to be, wholly personal. That he was really writing poems about his personal life in ways that, again, he was dying to straddle in prose and always did straddle in prose. But in poems, Ondaatje's poetry is similar. They write incredible poems, but they lack the tendrils of what they can do really poetically in prose. Same with Faulkner. I mean, the list is long. But Baldwin's real poetry is disguised as paragraphs all over his work.
All over his, it's like what I say about Emerson, Ed, Emerson's sentences are universes unto themselves, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same thing with Baldwin. You just, sometimes you don't need to read the next sentence. You just need to stay in that world,
Again, like any favorite song you ever had, you want to hear it again and again. Yeah.
Again and again. Yeah.
Hey man, let me ask you a couple questions from the students.
Sure, that'd be great.
I want to read this one. I gotta find the right one. Yeah. So here, this is Kelsey, I think. Baldwin, as far as I understand, is known for his essays, novels, plays, not his poetry. I must admit I didn't know he wrote poetry before I read Begin Again. Yet in this book, in Begin Again, you propose that James Baldwin answered Emerson's call for a national poet. I suspect you might endorse this idea even if Baldwin had never written a poem proper. Can you tell us a little more about how you understand the distinctly poetic nature of Baldwin's vision and work? What is unique about the American poet, finally knowing what Whitman attempted to answer in his national summons, and accepting the gestures Baldwin also makes to Whitman and No Name in the Street, Giovanni's Room, etc.? What can you tell us about the way Baldwin inherited Whitman's work? So how does Baldwin, the quote unquote poet, kind of follow Emerson and Whitman in your eyes?
Well, you know, Emerson's classic essay, The Poet, right, isn't just simply about those who write poetry.
Right.
Right? It's about those who offer us a way of seeing the world and seeing ourselves in more expansive terms,
Yeah.
right? And so in this sense, you know, Baldwin, to my mind, answers Emerson's call, just like Whitman. Right? And I've written an essay to show that No Name in the Street is in explicit conversation with democratic vistas.
Yeah.
You know, there are moments when he's referring to us as old pioneers in some ways, right? So, you know, you can't even get even, you know, and he's at one writing retreat where he's working his way through Whitman, right? While I think it's at the McDowell Colony. He's working his way through Whitman at the colony as part of his reading regimen. But I think part of what I wanted to do is to say that Baldwin exemplifies the writer that gets us to see ourselves in the most expansive of terms. That, you know, it's like Emerson says that the poet they're like the liberating gods, you know? And so to answer the student's question directly, I think it's precisely in Baldwin's effort to offer us a language that can bear the weight of reality.
There you are.
That he is in fact exemplifying the function of the poet.
Yeah.
Who's constantly trying to, you know, do something with language. There's a moment in all, you know, as much truth as we can bear, where, you know, in 1962, where he's taking issue with Fitzgerald and, you know, how they lift up Fitzgerald and Faulkner and Hemingway and Dos Passos and those folks. And he says his generation has to do violence to language, right? So he's always thinking about what is his role with the word.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that in that sense, he's like Whitman, he's answering Emerson's call.
Great.
In fact, in surpassing Emerson in some way.